All right, so let's get started. This is our session where we basically try to discuss which kernel version we're going to pick for Quantal, and then also go over our kernel flavors that we're going to be supporting for this release. So I kind of outlined here at the top what roughly is the predictions for the upcoming kernel releases. So 3.4 RC6 came out over this past weekend, and it sounded like it's nearing final release. So I would project that things like that that we might be interested in.
I suspect 3.4 is going to come out a little bit earlier than that, which might make it almost exactly on release day.
Could
be
possibly
very bad.
bump it up. I'd be even willing to release with an RC 3.6 kernel if it's late enough, like a 3.6 RC5, RC6, and then we'll pull in as an update because we are following an LTS release. It's not bad to be pushing the bleeding edge. Does anybody else have any thoughts, opinions? For example, Bryce, like the X stack, is there any specific
We haven't had a
requirements?
meeting yet on the X stack, so I don't have particular requirements right now.
We generally, whatever's newest is best.
Yeah.
So this is pretty good.
That's the biggest
Yeah. I'm not aware of anything specifically coming in the 3. I'm not aware of anything specific that we want from 3.6 that would be in 3.5.
What about hybrid graphics?
I think is it like the kernel stuff is pretty much in 3.4, isn't it? I think so.
Maybe like
3.5 will have more.
Well, we're certainly going to have 3.5 based on those numbers.
Yeah.
For sure 3.5. Question is, do we want to
maybe
go 3.6?
better Kepler supported. I don't know yet.
Say that again?
Maybe better Kepler graphics card support.
Oh, right.
Yeah, Kepler.
Actually, possibly, yeah, I suspect maybe OEM would like 3.6 rather than 3.5 for newer hardware, particularly, yeah,
Is David
yeah,
playing?
particularly as well.
Is there anything from the audio side of things we're going to see landing in?
Well, thanks for asking, but I don't think there is any specific new features. It's always the things when you're planning ahead. I mean, am I having my feature freeze now, or am I having my feature freeze 2 months from now for the 12-10 cycle? So for me, it's always the later the better.
Okay.
But, there is nothing in specific that I anticipate right now.
Wayland, will that have any impact?
No. It's
Just based on KMS?
yeah.
What about for ARM? I'm presuming the later we go, the better it is for ARM.
Newer, shinier, yeah.
I mean, smaller deltas for all the weird and wonderful.
Yeah, there's a lot of MI4 stuff spin up streams. I don't know about the other flavors so much, but yeah, newer is always better for ARM.
I mean, certainly the stuff I've been hearing, 3.5 is going to have most of. There will be some more, there's some more, but it's hard to know. I mean, maybe we just need to say 3.5 and then, but we'll review it when 3.5 comes out for a date point of view. Because if 3.4 comes out early, which it probably will, and 3.5 comes out early, 3.6 may actually be out by the time we have to
Yeah.
make it to release.
From the ARM server codes, like the RX is not listed on there. Do we need that added there? Because it's only OMAP and OMAP4.
That's true. We're
And then there'll be a calculator kernel coming in shortly. And
right.
then whatever-
Those are not being supported out of the district.
Okay.
They're actually separate packages, so we don't have to worry about them so much.
Calculator's a bit of an interesting case. It's exactly 3 patches, which is why I'd like to see it pop on the Ubuntu tree and then built out there. It's not exactly very high maintenance burden for 3 patches. So
How big are your 3 patches?
Question.
So my understanding, a few kilobytes. I can dig out the patches and get them to CC immediately.
That's an awfully big patch. Yeah, but it depends on what it impacts, really.
All right, so we'll make a decision on it when I forward it to you. It has to be in our kernel log, so we have or tree, you know.
Is that something collecting?
The vast majority of it is already done upstream, there's still these, the last few are the ones that
Tab?
have it.
Who's got the pad open? Stick an
I will.
action on Michael, or to get those patches to us.
Dan Fraser currently is the one dealing with the, calculated kernel. I'll make sure that those get to the right place.
Right.
Who do you want me to send it to?
So if they're public to the kernel team.
No, okay. They should be public now, so.
Right. And if they're not, you know where we are, until they are.
Yep.
So did we make, right
So I
now?
think our decision is we'll tentatively go for 3.5 and reevaluate around,
I think if we're
halfway
really
through.
close, if it's going to be an RC9, it's probably worth it.
yeah, and then we'll just wait to see when 3.5 comes out and
Hmm?
make an.
Where you heard that? We're
Uh,
definitely
for the
going
calculator.
3.5.
Well, definitely
Yeah,
3.5.
that's the one for
Just
seven.
Yes. So I think the follow-on conversation we have, as usual, is our supported flavors. So this is what we currently are supporting. I'd like to just point out that we have dropped the non-PAE kernel flavor. And so we do need to address how upgrades from Precise to Q are going to happen. Currently, you're going to be left on the Precise kernel if you upgrade to Q, as it is now.
Right.
You could have a generic meta package that's depends on the generic
Yes.
game. That would be one option. I do think we should do something like a pre-ins check that fails out. So if you do a PA CU, so that we can at least have an ugly way of telling people to screw your system.
Can you put down an action then for the kernel team to sort out the Linux generic meta package, ensuring it breaks if you can't actually support generic use?
Yeah.
So the Linux generic, Linux hyphen generic. Yeah.
It's a little bit weird that we end up with lots of generic flavor, but
It's just name.
it is the same.
You could always rename generic PA to generic.
It makes the upgrades more tricky.
No.
It complicates the upgrades in the reverse direction. It's the same complexity, but
So would you
I think
recommend
it's-
we should rename it?
I
If we're getting rid of it?
probably wouldn't recommend renaming in the grounds that people knew what it means. And it's
Perhaps we can rename it for the next release, and by the time we get to T, we're okay.
possibly, or maybe by then there'll be some other.
I have a question about the virtual-owns. Why do you have separate images? Because you know, if I go to the kernel config, I can just put module to everything like Zen and KVM.
Because the-
and whatever.
Those packages are smaller.
Much smaller. They don't include all of the modules by default, so that you can make very small virtual images.
Yes.
Is that
And then
still
just-
some sort of generic PAE with RM?
Yeah.
No, but I mean,
No, it's
So
not.
both
It's
packages
made,
are
it's separately
the
built,
same, but
and then
both
split
packages,
into two
yeah,
packages instead of one.
doesn't carry all the modules.
no, but I mean, like you could do it, split it off like the extra modules, and once you only need the virtual.
Well, that's what we do.
That's what the virtual package
Okay,
does.
okay, sorry. The way it looked like it was a distinct kernel.
It is a distinct. Could we? No, the problem is you end up with the name is exposed, unfortunately. It's where.
Yes.
So I'd like to point out that Rick did highlight that we're looking to, trim, get into fighting trim. Is there any flavors that we should look at eliminating, downsizing?
I think there really aren't that
They're
many to start
kind
with.
We did
I'm
get rid of most.
more eyeing the ports flavors.
Really?
I mean,
What
Please
about,
don't.
before we drift off into ports, what about the 32-bit virtual? Is that really in heavy use?
Yes, because if you have like a virtual machine, you don't need a full 64-bit address space if you have less than 4 gigabytes of memory.
But I'm not really caring about that. DMD64 still does the job. I mean, really, how many people are using it?
I think the question there, I mean, as we did, Colin did, I think, did some testing on small memory systems. I would imagine there are quite a lot of small VMs, as in half a gig of RAM or less.
Is that a reasonable use case?
It's
Yes.
actually a really
Yes,
valuable.
I would imagine
use
it's
case.
That's like the default if you go to Amazon, you get like a half gigabyte of memory for your VM.
Okay, so it's a money issue if you go to a bigger footprint.
Right, because you have to have a bigger memory.
Well, it's not even a
Which
money
sounds-
issue, though. There's just a generic cloud use case where you want to have a bunch of small VMs that have very specialized services, and it's a complete waste of resources and CPU time and everything else to be running a 64-bit kernel on there when you could just be running a bunch of i386 VMs. It's
Might be
actually,
different when we get to X32.
it's a sane, reasonable way to go if you're really splitting your cloud services out into a bunch of small areas.
So what if we drop generic PAE and just went with virtual? Is virtual split into a very small main package and then a much bigger extras package?
So are we suggesting that we turn virtual into a generic and just ignore the fact that there's a split? So if you install Linux generic, you get both packages, and if you install Linux virtual, you get only one.
Right, because essentially generic PAE and virtual are identical except for the way they're packaged.
Isn't that true on AMD64 as well?
Yes?
So is
That was
there any
actually
reason
my
to have the
question
two
too.
flavors
So
at all
why
instead of
they-
just having the split package?
Possibly not.
So why do they, you said it was a separate build class, rather than you do a separate config and build class for virtual? Why do you do it?
Just because of the build mechanism is easier to architect it that way. We used to make that exception,
That's why I was.
and it caused us a lot of problems, so we ripped it.
But if we're willing to offer two packages as a single installation unit for normal users, it presumably won't make any difference to them.
It's not like that, as long as they're connected to the
Certainly. Yeah, we'll investigate that with a view to merging them to reduce the number of
So you can do that for MD64 as well.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, with a view to doing it the same.
So we could get rid of two packages, or two flavors.
Like that.
I'm really getting tired of those pop-ups.
All right, on the ports.
Well, I was just wanting to bring up the discussion, should we still be maintaining these ports flavors?
So
Yes.
if people are willing to maintain it, why not?
Well, if we get rid of the kernels for the architecture will be a bit useless.
Yes.
A little bit.
Mind them?
Yeah. Do you actually have any maintenance burden whatsoever related to PowerPC?
Initially, yes, with the, I think the rebasing, we typically run into build failures.
Now,
usually with the
can you
dealership.
like
They're not
neglect
a
it?
huge maintenance.
It's been better since we've had more build fees.
Yeah.
When the build fees were lagging, it was huge.
We're getting more still,
Right.
so more and
So
faster.
we're going to get an updated report of that, would be helpful, if we're going to keep maintaining.
Yeah, we will. Wait, move Davis to build D and get one of the faster machines to support.
That would be nice.
But at least software is a little bit faster.
There was talk about merging the OMAP and OMAP 4 kernel. That could have what's
Who was talking about that?
Yeah, who was talking?
I don't know, but it was.
I mean, I think
It's technically impossible currently, so I'm curious.
it may not be in 3.5 or 3.6.
There have been various discussions in the context of the narrow about getting down to a single ARM kernel image, but it's a very easy discussion to have.
But there's a question, and right now we have a separate OMAP 4 package that we might be able to get rid of in the cycle because we may be able to
Conceivably,
build
if enough of it's upstream, we might be able to get rid of it.
We may be able to build them both out of master. And that we should get power to stick an action down for our team for that. Just put it down for our team for that.
Of course, that would mean that the ARM build would be definitively the longest one. But
Yeah, on the other hand, it's the longest individual build, but it ends up much shorter than it currently is because currently they release their master build and then Apollo rebases.
The actual
And 2 days
pipeline
later,
is
we get the
much
other
longer.
one, so much less lag.
Yeah.
I'm perfectly happy with that.
Oh, yeah.
Whether we would be able to build them out of master. Because in theory, OMAP 4 is very few patches in 3.4.
Yeah,
And hopefully,
that's what I've been told.
I've been told it's a handful now. And potentially in 3.5 they may be 0. So it may just be a config on.
There may still be something that's not accepted upstream, but it might be small enough patch set and self-contained enough that you can carry it in
So I'll start asking 3.5 is definite.
Yes.
Is there anything to look forward to for 3.6? I think that would actually be a good criterion to see if we should use 3.5 or 3.6 because I see kernel always may have problems. So I think it should depend, basically.
Right,
Whether
so
there's something to look
we're
forward
for sure gonna go with 3.5, and once 3.5 releases, we will reevaluate.
Yeah, when
Look at
IC1 is released, so you can see which sheet choose which ones are interestingly used. Yes.
And once 3.4 is out, we should be able to see what's in the what's next for 3.6.
Yes.
We've already talked about the other ARM flavors that may or may not come. Is there anything else?
Armel, are we going to continue to carry Armel? Is that everything decided?
Currently, yes, undecided if we may drop it later.
Okay.
It's an up in the air.
Awesome.
This may be an unpopular subject, given the context we just discussed, but it's been suggested that instead of the Ubuntu Studio group maintaining the low latency kernel, roll that patch into a build config. Is that
You mean the
possible?
RT patch?
I'm sorry?
You mean the real-time patch?
No, not the real-time patch, not the invasive real-time patch. This is just preempt on the config logs.
You carry a patch, I can't remember what it's for.
Yeah, but it's only like one line.
Yeah, it's just a config.
It's
Correct.
not currently a config, is it?
No, but it could be turned into a configuration.
So what do we feel about pulling another flavor back in and having just got rid of one? That would be AMD6 wiring?
It's both, yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Given how fast the new x86 build views are, I'm not sure it should be a massive concern, but I mean, there's currently the concern that there's the lag time for them to rebase their two-line patch, the time it was going to start to move, what have you.
So why can't,
And it would be probably ideal.
why
if it was built
cannot
in.
it be mainline, for example?
Well, potentially it could, but it's unlikely to be mainline before 3.6 anyway. But ignoring that, the question is more, are we willing to take on an extra config with an extra build? Because we're talking about a whole extra. Because I think you turn on preempt, right? That's the big thing you think you need. That isn't something that's configurable at runtime, right? So that has to be a separate build.
There's a bit of archive TDM and those being separate. Events needs headers, I think, depending on yours.
What do they?
So we can NPS like usually headers or so.
So it would simplify your life.
Much. It's not an issue.
Is there a way to figure out how to do this at one time? Yeah. I mean, is that schedule?
It's a complete, right now, there's nothing in the kernel.
So
What do we
is
think?
it just in the Zillion scheduler, or is it tentacles?
It's all the locks and everything, isn't it? Yeah. It's all.
Completely locked.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
Locks and.
It's if-def stuff.
And might be
So-
faster if CPU alternatives.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that should be done by CPU alternatives and isn't it?
Is it something that we're going to ask QA to QA?
What happened, I mean,
Not just for just
I assume by bringing it, well, I assume by bringing it into our package, even if it ends up in main as a result, we don't have to support it per se. If you sort of, as in warrant it.
we would. Well, that's the point. There would be a different kind of archive TDM because we would all want to put those images in inverse.
We could, I don't see that we need to, though.
Which I'm fine with, but marketing is fine.
I mean, if they end up in main, does that presumably is separate from the decision that the company is going to warrant them in any sense?
Well, we have an archive reorg session tomorrow, which may change the entire landscape there, so we're right doing the announcement.
So we probably would need to review that.
I think you might want to put names.
Or there's I mean, it sounded like there was a separate problem with their packaging, but there's a dependency on our packaging, which I can't understand why there would be, which we can probably eliminate even if we can't merge it, to reduce that teething.
Probably because there isn't really any point in shipping concept libraries. Sorry, but they're basically all the same.
We
Then they're not
routinely do
It's
that.
a tedium versus this.
Right, but we routinely do duplicate the headers for all the others to avoid this.
We do, but because this is so close,
Right.
it seems like it's not with shipping.
Okay. So we're going to make a decision later about that, based on the outcome of your session, potentially.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got a support concern, then the other what supports is going to be like it's not doing something.
Right. Okay. So I don't think I know what the answer is there.
Okay.
We're not totally against it, but it sounds like there's some confusion, and we need to resolve that before we make a decision. So we should probably communicate separately with you after, once those sessions have been done. You should tell us what sessions they are, so we can come and wave our flag.
Some of the foundations queue finish up.
Alright, so we'll get somebody there to hold up the flag and remind you that we had concern.
I would be happy to be there for that.
Sounds good.
I'm unwilling to add a third flavor, so only if we can collapse virtual and generic.
Okay.
Which seems like a good idea.
It does, any way you look at it. I think, duh, I didn't do this 6 months ago.
I think we were scared 6 months ago whether it was a good decision to have the second half, because the second half came quite late in the cycle, I think.
The only reason that it seems that I have any question about it at all is that it seems like one of those things that if it were correct, you would have done 10 years ago. But maybe I'll ask him to.
Have you met the current team?
We're very slow to change things deliberately, so. Because you don't get enough beer.
Or rather, we had too much and we forgot to think about it.
So it sounds like the assignment mistake was made when you introduced virtual extras, and instead what you should have done was the generic virtual.
The biggest
Or generic PA.
biggest mistake was allowing virtual to begin with, because it's grown organically, it was never designed, it's been a real pain in the
Is that a
ass.
hack for juice?
Absolutely.
But we had virtual because back in the day you couldn't have the Zen things
It
turned
was
on.
given some juice, we wanted to make cores.
Yeah.
And juice kind of morphed into a very, very slowly turned core classification.
And its virtual core just keeps growing because people keep pasting shit on it.
This is a good time for complete change.
Yes. All right.
Anything
Just
else?
switch to FreeBSD.
Okay.
First,
If you got rid of
Herd. Go to the herd.
you need to get rid of the VPN. Yeah, just another deck first.
All right, I think that's a wrap unless anybody has anything else to bring up.
Sounds like we've got plenty of work going on. Yeah.
Right?
Do we need to save this?
So,
So take the contents of the tab and send it to Leanne.
Yes, please.
Just in case the tab eats it. Not that we're paranoid at all. What produces those?
Empathy.
As far as I know, the app that says that's not running. At least this thing says it's not running.
it is, right?
Use that kill all command name.
I'm gonna get that.
maybe somebody
No
integrated this
PKL.
into the kernel.
It's because there's no Windows for it, though.
It's right there
Doesn't
next to
notice
the
it.
D-bus driver.
Beyond me.
Yeah, what's happening with
I'm sure I asked it to quit. See, it's not there. Not way. Great.
Yes.